let's talk about Ruby's weapons. Now, before I get into discussing the actual design and abilities of the weapons, I first wanted to explain why I think this is important enough to make a 10-page long script about this. If you know anything about RWBY, you know the Red trailer. It has like millions of views. It is the most revered element of the show, and many of RWBY's fans consider it a necessity to watch, whether you actually watch the show or is just a fan of this fantastic animation and choreography. But there's something important about the Red trailer, and truly the other 3 color trailers that we don't ever really talk about. These trailers really don't establish these characters. The characters are featured, but these events of these trailers are loosey-goosey when considered canon or not. Hell, some of their personalities aren't even consistent with how they actually are written in the show, if they even get a hint of personality at all. No, really, what these trailers are for are their weapons. RWBY was sold to us as an excuse to see cool weapons killing cool things in cool battles. The interesting characters wielding those weapons and the story setting up those fights is the reason we keep watching the show. But we can't pretend that the idea of seeing a death scythe chopping up demon wolves wasn't what actually sold us on this concept. And that's not a bad thing, because the weapons truly are just as important as the characters. They reflect on the different characters' preferred fighting styles and speak on the characters' personalities. Honestly, RWBY herself puts it best.
It's just weapons. They're an extension of ourselves. They're a part of us. Oh, they're so cool.
And this line, coming from the 2nd episode ever, only hammers home how the weapons of RWBY have an extra importance and play major roles for our characters. Well, at least they first felt this way. Now I won't lie, not every early RWBY weapon was good. Looking at you, Porton Glinda. But it's become much more obvious over the years that the weapons in RWBY have become more and more of an afterthought. Now I could just chalk it up to my own personal opinions or just dismiss the topic by saying they got lazy, but really, there's more to it than that. Also, if I cast such a broad net over all of the more recent weapons, I would be undermining the few that are interesting. So today, I really wanted to take the time to deconstruct what the real difference between these and these are. Because just like Crescent Rose itself, this topic is a lot more complex than it might look at first glance. And it's a bit hard to know where exactly I should begin here, but I think it's important to point out that even in-universe, the characters are viewing their weapons differently nowadays compared to the early volumes. We all know how RWBY's obsession over cool-looking weapons have been completely abandoned for her character, but there's another much more subtle change too.
I guess I did go a little overboard in designing it.
You made that?
Of course! All students at Signal forge their own weapons.
To further hammer home what RWBY said about their weapons being an extension of themselves, this line really implies that weapons are a personal, important concept to the huntsmen and huntresses. To, even at such an early age, take the time to fine-tune a weapon to perfectly fit you and your preferences shows us that the very concept of having a weapon carries much more weight than other shows might have. Yeah, there's plenty of fantasy-esque shows with characters who use cool, wacky weapons and whatever, but in the universe of RWBY, it's implied that having your own weapon is some sort of personal adventure. This isn't just a sword Weiss is wielding. That's not just some hammer Nora has. These are their weapons. They made them. They put in the effort to fine-tune them and to make their weapons a perfect fit for them and them alone. But then, this happened.
Holding on to your weapons for so long. The upgrades you requested they were more than I anticipated. Your new weapons and armor should be as requested.
Somewhere along the course of the volumes, the idea of building your own weapon has been completely forgotten, and now the heroes need to rely on someone else to adjust their weapons for them. Now, admittedly, this is a minor concept in the long run, but I think it really hammers home the exact shift in the way the show and even the characters approach the use and the designs of their weapons now, which I think now is as good a time as any to address the most prominent element when it comes to how the weapons are designed nowadays. They don't transform anymore. The transformative nature of RWBY's weapons were honestly one of the biggest draws to the show. There's plenty of fantasy stories where characters use scythes and or guns, but Crescent Rose was both. More importantly, the transformations for those weapons felt so real. The way that each piece slid into place perfectly left an impact. The way the blade unfolds, the way that back spear piece extends. Hell, it looks so real that people have actually recreated Crescent Rose with its transforming nature. Now, not every weapon was like this, Penny's strings and Weiss's rapier, etc., etc., but the thing with those weapons were how they played around with their artillery. See, Crescent Rose doesn't just unfurl because it looks cool, but it's because there's different weapons mechanics working together. It can be a gun, or a scythe, and the scythe can still shoot bullets. The use of bullets in RWBY's weapons gave it a futuristic pizzazz with its style, and set RWBY apart from other fairy tale inspired shows. But slowly, over the years, those bullets have been more and more rare to see in RWBY's weapons anymore. First, it was a lot of shooting out an element, which, okay, it works for some weapons like Flint's trumpet, but it's a little boring with things like Gwen's staff. And then the elemental aspect started to feel more and more like an afterthought, and started to make less and less sense with the designs of their weapons, like how Leo's shield can only fire one thing at a time, after needing to charge up for a few seconds first, and only if you hold the shield in one of the least protective ways to hold a shield. I think one of the saddest things about how bland the artillery has become in RWBY is that it completely undermines the point of Jean's sword. The whole point with his simple sword and collapsible shield is that it was considered archaic.
It's a hand-me-down. My great-great-grandfather used it to fight in the war.
Sounds more like a family heirloom to me.
Jean was considered subpar for having such a simplistically designed weapon, but now this is the standard. Hell, not even counting his 2 different upgrades, his original version of his sword now looks vastly more technical and intricate compared to things like Clover's fishing hook or Robin's crossbow. And now we have characters who barely even use weapons, carrying them around more like props rather than an extension of themselves. Hell, there's also a surprising amount of characters who don't use any weapons at all. Gira? Okay, sure, he's retired. I can see why he wouldn't have had a weapon on him for this fight. Hazel? Sure, alright. I guess it makes sense with his semblance. We could have done something more creative, but I guess it works. Salem? Really? Salem, the main antagonist of RWBY, doesn't have a weapon. If you told me 9 years ago that the big bad of RWBY, the show where the first trailers showcase their weapons over everything else, and she doesn't have one at all, I probably would have laughed my ass off over such an ass-backwards concept. But getting back on topic, the transformative nature of RWBY's weapons have all been forgotten over the years. Hell, even the weapons that do transform never even get to anymore. Nowadays, it's either deploy fully unfolded already, or they just put on the stock spin effect over the character's hands and suddenly RWBY's gun is a scythe now. And I think one of the biggest reasons these weapons feel so bland on arrival is that there's no style when they're being presented to us. I distinctly remember everyone's weapon introductions for the first 3 volumes. Even if we ignore the color trailers, each weapon had an impact. We lavished over watching their weapons unfolding for the first time. We stop to only take a second to stare at their weapons, to enjoy the way they unfold, to see the intricate details of their designs. Then, first thing after each weapon gets deployed, it's something awesome. We took the time to really introduce a character's weapon, akin to introducing a character themselves. Nowadays, not really. Vine used his weapon once. He actually has a weapon, and he used it briefly in that one fight. Can you even remember how it looked? What move did he even do with it? The first time we saw Harriet use her bracers, it was this shot against the Ice Gygus. It deploys really quickly, and we linger more on her face and her semblance rather than her weapon. Really, it gets used, but we don't highlight it in any way. So much so that, psych, I've completely lied to you. Haha, did I get ya? Because this is not the first time Harriet uses her bracers. This is.
Damn it. Blake, stand back!
Yeah, that was it. A whole 4 seconds in a dark cave where she did one simple move to accomplish a very simple task. Something I'm pretty sure Yang could have done as well. And then it's over and we don't cut back to her until after seeing the kids play with their weapon upgrades and Marrow does his thing. No wonder this punch feels much more like her weapon's introduction, because she actually got to do something. When RWBY first started, I was always on the edge of my seat whenever they introduced a new character, because I couldn't wait to see what their weapons would be. But now, Hell, their weapons barely seem to hold any impact. There's no style, no cool flashy move to highlight its abilities. Hell, they don't even use the weapons for like anything. One of the most fun aspects of RWBY was how they would use their weapons during non-combative reasons. Nora's hammer reveal wasn't to hit an enemy, it was to launch them across the gorge. Pyro's weapon reveal was to save Jean from falling. Even little things, like RWBY using her scythe to play with Zwei or hang up the curtains. To further hammer home the concept that these machines are extensions of these characters, they use them in unique ways, even if it isn't to kill an enemy. In fact, a lot of the weapons' use was to help a character with just moving around. Bullets launch them places, Blake's ribbon is used to swing under the bridge, and we don't see that anymore. Now the characters can effortlessly fly across the battlefield all on their own, and weapons only ever get deployed in the middle of combat. There's just a distinct lack of creativity when it comes to these things now. Not just with how they transform or how cool they are when they first get used, but like the actual weapons themselves. Earlier, I mentioned Flintz's battle trumpet, and I bet at least a few of you snickered to yourselves over the ridiculousness that someone actually used a trumpet to fight monsters. But here's the thing, as silly as it sounds, you still remember it. It's a wacky, creative concept, and honestly, I think these unconventional weapons are some of the most interesting. Neon has glow stick nunchucks. Neo uses an umbrella to fight. That bitch fought with a hoverboard. That's so cool! But more importantly, it's not that these are just out of the ordinary weapon choices, it's how they use them in actual combative use. For example, let's look at Clover's Kingfisher, which is probably one of the most unique weapons from current RWBY. It's a fishing hook. That's pretty interesting, but things quickly go downhill when you realize just how blandly he uses it. Neo's parasol isn't just a parasol. It acts as a shield. She uses it as a battering weapon. There's a hidden blade in the handle. Despite appearing to be just an umbrella, it's still very much a weapon. One perfectly designed to match Neo's fighting style. Kingfisher is a fishing rod. He can loop strings around things and he can smack you with the pole, so nothing too fancy. No hidden dust compartments, no unorthodox abilities. Hell, this part at the end looks like it might have been a harpoon that he could have launched out on the other side of the rod, but apparently no, because he never does that, so it's just a fishing rod. See, it's not just picking creative sounding weapons or items to turn into a weapon. Clearly it's how those ideas work together. Umbrella plus bat plus shield plus knife. That is what makes Neo's parasol. Trumpet plus cannon. Fishing hook. That's it. Now I'll admit, not every multi-use weapon is a good idea. A thermos flamethrower is more ridiculous than a trumpet in my opinion, and it's not like slapping random weapon parts around isn't always cool looking. Portz's blades being tucked under his arms while he's firing is a perfect example of how not to do this. So stupid, this is so dumb. And hell, when there are multi-use weapons now, they don't work in tandem anymore. For example, Crescent Rose can still shoot bullets while in scythe mode. Nowadays, weapons either do one of two things. Marrow either has a gun or a boomerang. There's no combining of those two components together in any creative way. It's always an either or, and this has also started affecting the other weapons too. Nora never uses her rockets to launch her hammer anymore. It's always either bullets or hammer. And now the only times different weapons get used at the same time is if a character is dual wielding something. Watts can use his rings and his pistol at the same time, but that's only because those are two different things that fit in his two different hands. And now that I've mentioned it, let's address RWBY's guns. One of the show's catchphrases is, "It's also a gun." But funny enough, that really undermines the exact creativity of this concept, because Crescent Rose isn't just also a gun. It's a specific gun.
It's also a customizable, high-impact sniper rifle.
That's a very specific gun, and you can tell that specific gun was chosen for RWBY if you pay attention. The others' gun-like qualities are also specific for them. It's not a gun, it's a grenade launcher. It's not just a rapier, it's got the barrel of a revolver. It's not any old bullet coming out of those gauntlets, they're specifically shotgun shells. If you've spent literally 4 seconds playing any video game that features variety of guns, you know that these are different guns and they can have huge differences. And that's really important. You want a slow firing rate but extreme accuracy? Pick a sniper. You want a big area of impact but short range? Pick a shotgun. Hell, even just different kinds of pistols can feel massively distinct. Watch these load times for Claire's 6-shooter versus Leon's Matilda. The speed, the amount of bullets, the strength of the impact, and believe you me, I really don't know guns that well. But even I know the differences between these artillery types can greatly affect your combat style. Which is why it's gotten to be pretty disappointing how the world of RWBY now only ever seems to feel like one bullet gets used. The same bullet. It's just some generic thing for every gun to shoot, with the same reload times, and it has the same impact. The same pros and cons, and now every single gun in Remnant is exactly the same. Maybe that's why there's suddenly been an influx in characters who don't use bullets anymore. Instead, they just fire off that one element or an arrow or something. It's to the point that despite the fact we can see Ironwood and Watts are carrying vastly different weapons, they still fire the exact same way. They still react to their bullets the same. They might as well be the exact same gun. Hell, they gave Ironwood this big dumb laser gun, and quite frankly, it still feels no different than anyone else's bullets. Yeah, it's bigger, greener, and flashier, but really his reload, his recoil, the attack strength, none of it. It all just feels the same. The interesting thing about these characters having a bunch of different crazy weapon combos was the notion that they would all fight differently from each other. Weiss doesn't fight anything like Blake, and she doesn't fight anything like RWBY, or anything like Sun, or anything like Penny, and so on and so forth. Even characters with similar styles, or were directly tutored under, aren't supposed to feel the same. Crow's fighting style is different from RWBY's, at least it used to be. It's not only the fact that every gun and bullet now feels exactly the same as each other, even their more unique weapons feel the same too. Everyone's strategy has turned into run straight at the enemy and do a big quick slash. Everyone's defense is to slap their weapons together. It all feels very samey. There's no creativity. It doesn't matter if RWBY is fighting a Grim or Harriet or Cinder or whatever, it all just feels the same. The choreography in RWBY has become overrun with speed. Everyone moves like a blur. Characters zip around and their weapons leave no impact. Moves become so fast, it's become hard to follow, or at the very least feel floaty and weightless. Even the characters who are meant to be heavies, like Yang, Nora, Hazel, or Elm, they all feel the same. They're all flying around at supersonic speeds, and their swings feel empty. Quite frankly, it doesn't matter if a character is holding a sword, a bow, a dagger, a scythe, a rapier, a fishhook, a spear, or anything. It all lands exactly the same way. And I think this breakneck speed for the fights has started because of how slow the fights were in Volume 5. It's no surprise that Volume 5 is considered the worst volume of the whole series, especially when it came to combat. Swings are slow, lazy motions blocked bullets, speed would have helped, not made it good, but it would have helped hide some of their animation mistakes and ugliness. That's why the maiden fight under Haven is considered the best fight in the volume. There was actual speed to the characters there. Now it seems like they've overcorrected and every character zips around. Every character displays feats of incredible motion and speed, and not only does it undermine RWBY's whole gimmick of being fast, but it also makes every weapon feel the same in battle. Even if a character really does something unique with their weapons, some cool move or some interesting combo, I can't ever see it. It zips across screens so fast, I just can't keep up. No wonder none of these new weapons hold any impact on me. I never even really get to see them, even when they're in action. And you know what? I'm honestly willing to forgive all of that. Every point I've made throughout this whole video, I'm willing to forgive. So a weapon doesn't transform? Okay, fine. So it's a boring weapon choice? Whatever. It's not fun in combat? Honestly, who cares? But the one thing I can't forgive is how boring they all are. Like, visually. Their colors, their styles, that is what I think is really killing the weapons in RWBY as the series goes on. I talked about how bland Harriet's bracers are, right? Well, let's compare those to Yang's gauntlets. In essence, basically the same concept for their weapons, right? But look at that! What are those? bright, highlighter yellow. Not only do they draw your eye to the fun part of the combat, her weapon, but it also matches the rest of her aesthetic. The yellow of her gauntlets match her hair, the black accents match her shorts, the red bullet casing match her eyes. Ember Celica is made for Yang. It oozes style and personality. Harriet's weapon? Washed out whites and gray tones. It's just the same colors as the Aesop's uniforms. There's nothing Harriet specific about this, making it feel like they weren't even actually made for her. Whether she's wearing them or not, it doesn't draw your eye in any way. Originally, the weapons matched the character. Crescent Rose is Ruby's signature red. Pyrrha's spear and shield share her red and golds, and even have swirling accents like in her headband. Even the more simplistic palettes, like Nora's hammer and Ren's pistols. Nora's bullets are still that neon pink that's iconic to Nora. Her grenades are decorated with a heart design. Hell, if she launches them all out, a gigantic heart shape comes up. No one else's weapon has anything like that. This is a Nora-specific element. And while Ren's pistols are just one solid shade of green, they're still his shade of green. You can't mistake these for Oobleck's or Penny's weapons because they're not their specific colors. Nowadays, weapons are mostly just washed out single-note colors. They don't match the character's design, they blend into the backgrounds. They only feature washed out, pukey, muddy versions of the character's signature colors, or mostly just grays. Not even an impressive type of silver, just gray. Like, did you even notice Robin's crossbow is shaped like a bird? There's no emphasis for it. Even when they bother to give these new weapons some style, it just gets overlooked due to its drab color palettes. Could you imagine if Team RWBY used these washed out colors for their weapons? Even the simple colored weapons like Gamble Shroud and Martinaster still have pop to them. The ribbon accessory is eye-catching, that simple stripe of white. The colors in Weiss's chamber, the ornate details in the handle. This is why even though Weiss uses a simple rapier, it's still vastly more visually striking than Winters' simple sword. They're both simple weapons with simple color palettes, but there's nothing unique to Winters' handle. There's no eye-catching pop of those dust chambers. Like, let's take a boring weapon like Merrow's Fetch and jazz it up. Just make some more interesting colors and patterns, something where you can actually see the weapon now. Because this show plays with colors a lot, and usually characters' hair, eyes, or outfits will feature some important pop of colors. So all those things keep stealing your eyes away from their weapons whenever they're in use. And I know they can make this work still. Watts' gun is visually entertaining with its color palette. If he can get a cool looking weapon, why can't everyone else? But I think more importantly, all of this I've talked about here is because there's a lack of care being put into the weapons. Somewhere along the way with the volumes, weapons became less and less important, while semblances became more and more prominent. Now, semblances are another fun aspect that makes RWBY a fun show and gives the fights emphasis, but it's never really been treated this way before. Semblances were used so rarely that we didn't even get to see Nora's until Volume 3, Ren's until Volume 4, and Jean didn't even unlock his until Volume 5. Semblances were mostly used for combo moves, or to have a really cool, big, flashy fight finisher. But nowadays, usually their semblances tend to feel like the real important aspect when designing a character. I can think of a million times Vine or Elm use their semblances over their weapons. Not in tandem with their weapons, but instead of their weapons. Now, I don't necessarily think highlighting a character's special superpowers during combat is a bad thing, but it seemingly has completely taken over, to the point where it's changed the way our characters fight. It's no surprise Weiss has completely changed her style to start using her sword like a wand. Now it's all about her semblance, using her glyphs, summoning something else to fight for her. She doesn't swing her blade, she never tries to stab a foe. She might as well be holding Glinda's riding crop for all it's worth. And I'm not trying to dismiss the importance semblances have, but that's also not what the show is sold on. The red trailer isn't meant to highlight RWBY's speed. Hell, it's arguable if she even used her semblance in this fight at all, or if it was just the weight of the bullets pushing her around. And I know even me saying that is a point of contention because there are still people out there who don't understand how RWBY's semblance even works.
RWBY is capable of traveling at an extreme velocity from one point to another by breaking herself down to her molecular components.
There are still people who don't understand that RWBY's semblance allows her to move extra fast, and they think it's only meant to turn into rose petals. Still, They explained it in the fucking show, guys. They actually just pay attention to what Penny is actually saying. So while semblances are fun and are fantastic for combat, it means that weapons have suddenly become unimportant. Weapons now act as little more than a prop to point at someone you don't like, to bounce off an enemy's weapon flaccidly, to be an excuse for someone else to show off their semblance, nothing more, and it's just a shame. Like I said, the show really sold itself on the use of cool, crazy weapons. Nowadays, they might as well not even have them. There's a distinct lack of creativity, whether it's in the design, the function, the choreography, all of it. And like I said, there's a lot that goes into what makes a weapon interesting or not. There's no simple answer to solve this problem. Oh, give it flashy colors! Well, Watts' gun is flashy, but in battle it's no different than anyone else's guns. Use unique items to combine together. Well, Marrow's weapon is a gun boomerang, and that's pretty unique, but it's still a boring weapon in combat. Give it really intricate transformation. Well, even Robin's crossbow unfolds, but it's still bad. It's to the point where I question, did RWBY really lose that part of her personality, where she's a big weapons enthusiast? Or have all the weapons just been so boring lately that even RWBY can't be bothered to care about them? The important part of the weapons is the ingenuity and the creativity. There's style to their movements. There's pizzazz to the way they chose to wield their weapons. There's a unique way that they go about their blocks, their parries, their hits, when they transform their weapons, when they use their semblances with their weapons. There's something creative, and that's just not here these days with these new weapons. And yeah, I know, big talk, right? Hey guys, just be more creative, as if it's that easy.
Blue. Green.
Green is not a creative color.
And also, let's be honest, it's not like it's an exact science or anything. This is still a very much subjective concept. You might think Nora's hammer is stupid and Robin's crossbow is the coolest thing since sliced bread. Fine. And it's not like when I talk about RWBY's fan animations, because there's not just one person at play here. There's a designer, a modeler, a choreographer, several animators, so saying just be more creative is reductive and not helpful. So finding a real conclusion to this video really isn't that simple. The only advice I could potentially give is take more time to play with the weapons, view the weapons as characters themselves, and truly do something that sticks out to you. Something you have fun with. Have your work excite you. A fancy move or a snazzy design, really play into it. Lavish over these parts that you like, and help make the weapons truly feel like extensions of their wielders. Maybe take some time to sit down and look at RWBY's weapons, and think about which ones you love and which ones you hate. Think about why. What did the good ones do so well that makes you enjoy them, and what did the bad ones do that you think they could have improved on? And I hope this video was insightful to you, and maybe helped you understand why it is you do or don't like certain weapons in RWBY. And at the end of the day, I think we can all agree that at the very least, Ports' weapon is real fucking stupid, huh?
And let me see what you have.
Oh
No!
Beans, peanut butter, and a knife.
Well, fuck this.
And now the only time different weapons get used at fucking, wow, I think, against the Ice Gygus. It's a pull. Ice Gygus? Is that what it's called? Frost Gygus. Huh. Shout out to my $10 patrons, you're all amazing. Nako, James Dodds, Cool Duck, Andrew, Ramiel, Valhalla Knight, Chamomile, G Extreme, Classy Critic, Sunny Shy, Great Bar, Caleb Grimm, Pentamenta, Jake, Storm, Amber, Lolith, Hype Man, Luno the Evoker, Zero to Hero, Isaiah, and Joshua. So yeah, I hope you liked this video. I had a lot of fun with it. It's been a long time coming, and you know what? I might even do a follow-up video eventually in the future, because there's just a lot to talk about with RWBY's weapons. Let me know, what do you think about the things I touched on in this video? Do you agree or disagree with any of the points I make? What's your favorite and least favorite weapon in RWBY? So yeah, any and all thoughts and opinions, leave them in the comments below, and I'll see ya in the next one. Bye bye.